잠시 후 2021 DMZ 포럼 기획 세션 5 경기도 남북교류 협력 증진 협력 정책의 성과와 과제 주제를 맡은 세션이 시작될 예정입니다. 네, 외빈 여러분들께서는 자리에 착석해 주시기 바랍니다. May I have your attention, please? Parallel Session 5, Performance and Issues of Inter-Korean Exchange and Cooperation Policy of 경기도 is about to start. Please come into the hall and take your seat. Also, may I ask you to set your mobiles or other electronic devices to silent mode. Thank you. 모든 세션은 동시 통역으로 제공이 되고 있으며 한국어는 7번, 영어는 8번입니다. As an official language of this forum is English, so simultaneous interpretation service will be provided today for your needs. It's channel number 7 for Korean and channel number 8 for English. 유튜브로 생중계되는 이번 2021 DMZ 포럼은 코로나19 방역 지침을 준수하여 방역을 포함해 또 정부에서 권고하는 모든 지침 사항들을 준수하여 안심하고 여러분들께서 행사에 참여하실 수 있도록 모두가 마스크를 쓰고 안전하게 진행하고 있습니다. 네, 그럼 잠시 후 1시 30분부터 2021 DMZ 포럼 기획 세션 5 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 여러분 안녕하십니까?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me commence the parallel session 5 under the topic of performance and issues of the inter-Korean exchange and cooperation policy of the Gyeonggi-do. Before we commence the session, let us invite Ms. Kyu-sun Shim, the chair of the Planning and Finance Committee of the Gyeonggi-do Assembly.
Good afternoon. My name is Shim Kyu-sun, the chair of the Planning and Finance Committee. Welcome to the DMZ Forum under the topic of the performance and issues of inter-Korean exchange and cooperation policy of Gyeonggi-do. I welcome all of you and thank you very much for your time. In particular, I would like to appreciate for the moderator, Dr. Chae-wan-gyu of Institute of Trans Division and Border of Studies, Mayor Chung Ha-young of Gimpo City, Peace Corporation Bureau General Shin Jung-young of Gyeonggi-do, and the council member of Kim Dal-soo of Gyeonggi Assembly. In 2001, we've established the bylaw of the Inter-Korean Exchange and Cooperation. And it has been 20 years since we moved forward under this bylaw. Gyeonggi Province is neighboring province to share the border with North Korea. It is the biggest local government in Korea in the area of economy, academia, health, and the culture, we are leading various activities regarding the peace policies, and we would like to continue to do so in the establishment of the peaceful relation with the North Korea. Through this opportunity of the event today, we would like to analyze our achievement, and we want to be harsh on us and strict to think of where to improve. And eventually, we would like to elicit an improvement in the policy directions, and I hope to see more in-depth discussion. In my Committee of Planning and Finance, we will strive to establish the peaceful foundation. Despite your busy schedule, once again, I would like to thank all of you for your presence and participation in this forum today.
네, 그럼
Thank you. Now let us officially commence the parallel session 5. Let me introduce the participants. First of all, let me introduce Mr. Wan-Yu Che, the moderator of the session, the professor from Shinhan University. And our first presenter, Mr. Ha-Young Jung, Mayor of Gimpo City. And the second presenter, Ms. Junyoung Shin from the Gyeonggi Provincial Government. And we have three panelists today, Mr. Dae-soo Kim, the member of Gyeonggi-do Assembly. We also have Ms. Jae-sim Yu, the researcher from Seoul National University. We also have Mr. Sang Young-hong, the Secretary General of Korean Sharing Movement. Now, let me pass the microphone to today's moderator, Professor Wan-Yu Che. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Good afternoon. My name is Che Wan-gyu, as introduced. You are at the parallel session 5 under the topic called Performance and Issues of Inter-Korean Exchange and Cooperation Policy of Gyeonggi-do Province. We have two presentations today, followed by panel discussion with the three discussants. We have about 80 minutes for this session. Therefore, the presentation will go on up to 20 minutes so that we can utilize more time for the panel discussion. And each panel discussant will have about 10 minutes. And if we have more time, I hope to hear the answers of panel discussants from the presenters. Now I would like to introduce Peace Corporation Bureau General Shin Junyoung of Gyeonggi Provincial Government. As mentioned, that we have two presenters, and these presenters are both from local governments of the Republic of Korea, and in the area of inter-Korean relations, these local governments are highly interested in and leading such activities. That's why our presentations today are furthermore meaningful. Now I would like to hand over my microphone to General Shin Junyoung.
안녕하세요.
Good afternoon. My name is Shin Junyoung. I would like to talk about our achievement and the direction of the inter-Korean exchange and cooperation. First of all, I would like to focus on what we did in 2020 and followed by our plan in 2021.
어, 2020년 그 한반도 평화
This is our provincial government's effort and achievements in establishing a peace regime in 2020. First of all, expanding Gyeonggi-do's role for cooperation for peace building on the Korean Peninsula. Second, preparing for the era of lasting peace and seeking social consensus on advancing peaceful unification. And third, preserving the pristine nature of the DMZ. First, I would like to talk about expanding our role for cooperation for peace building. To prevent floating of leaflets into the north, we've designated 5 areas, and for the first time as a local government, we've provided related regulations. And to pursue this legislation, we've asked various stakeholders for the cooperation. Next one. We are also highly interested in the livestock disinfection and humanitarian aid. And then also we ask for lifting sanction of the UN. And last, at the local government level, we've created the consensus, and we also sent some youth volunteer group to Asia, such as Vietnam and Cambodia. And through such ODA activities, we've established our reputation. And next, preparing for the era of lasting peace and seeking social consensus. And first, we established a plan for the peaceful use of the restricted waterway of the Han River estuary and pushing ahead with the opening of the special economic zone for peaceful unification. Also, we seek social consensus on the reopening of Kaesong Industrial Complex and provide support for the complex's resident companies. And our vice governor opened the office for 40 days near Imjingak, and we've supported these resident companies through the technological support and consulting. Also, we've pursued training for peace education. Also, we've provided support for the North Korean defectors for their stable relocation and settlement. Next, preserving the pristine nature of the DMZ, ensuring its peaceful use and promoting its value as a must-have experience destination. First, we've created tourist facilities near Camp Grebes. It used to be the U.S. base, and we took over from the U.S. And in order to do so, we've provided the alternative facilities for the military. And we also operated the ecological path around Imjingang River, and we also provided some tourism service training. Next, building tourism infrastructure for providing the significance of the DMZ, ensuring its peaceful use. We've created the ecological park of peace in Gimpo Egibong and the Pyeonghwa Nuri Path. And we've renewed museum and exhibition in Turasan Pyeonghwa Park. Next, highlighting the need to establish lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula through Let's DMZ. We've had various events such as DMZ Forum, Live in DMZ, DMZ Village, and other exhibition and hands-on exhibition. And we also created some road documentary for airing. Next, our aims of Gyeonggi-do's peaceful reunification policy in 2021. We broadly have 4 goals for such plan. First, promoting inter-Korean exchange and expanding policies for cooperation for peace building. Second, laying the foundation for cooperation for peace building and reinforcing the empathy of Gyeonggi-do citizens on this issue. Third, developing the DMZ in a manner that preserves its pristine nature. And the last, eliciting greater support of international community. First, promoting inter-Korean exchange and expanding policies for cooperation. To that end, we've hope to take steps to advance sustainable inter-Korean exchange and cooperation. We've also prepared and will continue to do so to improve inter-Korean relations through various supporting projects. For example, the automation of a hog farm. And the second one is related to our forum today, and we've had some Council for Local Governments for Inter-Korean Cooperation with the 53 local governments, and Gyeonggi-do hope to lead the way. Third, creating and dispersing the mood for peace building on the Korean Peninsula. We've hosted the 2021 Gyeonggi Peace Concert, and we continue the UCC Contest for Peace Policies. Second, laying the foundation for cooperation for peace building and reinforcing the empathy of Gyeonggi-do citizens. We promote the peaceful use of the restricted waterway of Han River estuary jointly with the North, and we will continue to do so to July this year. Next, exerting efforts to open the special economic zone for peaceful unification. To do so, we will continue to push ahead with legislation. Next, seeking social consensus on reopening of the Kaesong Industrial Complex and providing support for complexes resident companies based in Gyeonggi-do. And Gyeonggi-do will continue to support these resident companies for Kaesong Industrial Complex. Next, enhancing the awareness of local citizens on significance of peaceful unification and improving the local government activities and performance in relation to peaceful unification. To do so, we want to provide some peace education and unification education for the future generation of the unification. Next, developing the DMZ in a manner that preserves its pristine nature. To do so, we want to take action to promote the designation of surrounding areas of DMZ and the Han River estuary as a biosphere reserve by UNESCO. And next, we want to reinforce Gyeonggi-do's foothold as a tourism hub by creating a historical park on the former Camp Greece site. And we want to have more tour like DMZ Peace Tour, and we have a gondola tour, and we want to create a more program to boost the tourism related to reunification. Next, building tourism infrastructure for the peaceful use of the DMZ. To do so, we want to secure and improve some facilities for the DMZ culture, tourism, and hands-on activity contents. Last but not least, providing the development of surrounding areas of the DMZ by creating the northernmost area exploration path. Fourth, eliciting greater support of the international community to achieve lasting peace on the peninsula. First of all, we want to form a global network of cooperation for peace building and seeking joint projects, and we want to have a discussion at least 5 times a year. Next, through hosting DMZ, Let's DMZ Peace Festival, we want to enhance the citizens' awareness of the peace on the Korean Peninsula. We are hosting DMZ Forum live in DMZ. And live in DMZ includes a DMZ Village, DMZ Concert, and this will continue throughout the year. Last but not least, promoting the peace and co-prosperity of the international community through joint international development projects, such as volunteer work of the youth to overseas, feasibility study, platform establishment projects, and international forestry cooperation. And these are what Gyeonggi government wants to pursue. As a center for peace and prosperity of the Korean Peninsula, Gyeonggi Province pursues peace exchange and cooperation. For the peninsula to welcome a new era of prosperity, Gyeonggi Province will strive its cooperation with the National Assembly, central government, and other local governments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Junyoung Shin, for your great presentation. Through your presentation, I once again realized how much effort the Gyeonggi province has made for the co-prosperity between the two Koreas. However, because of other factors, aside from the government's effort, the province residents were not able to feel the actual effect of such effort. It is quite unfortunate, and I'm afraid the achievement was not realistic enough. And I have to apologize because the first presenter was supposed to be Mayor Ha-young Jung, but I made a mistake. My apologies. So Junyoung Shin smoothly made her presentation. And it is good actually because her presentation was more broader concept. So I believe I made a mistake. However, it didn't make that much disturbance to the session. So Mayor Ha-young Jung was supposed to be the first presenter, but I made a mistake. I apologize for that. Let me invite Mayor Ha-young Jung for his presentation on the Gimpo-si's effort on the inter-Korean cooperation. Thank you for inviting me to this meaningful event. I am Ha-young Jung, the mayor of Gimpo City. You all have much experience in the inter-Korean cooperation and paid much attention. And our moderator especially paid a lot of attention to the inter-Korean cooperation. So let me talk about Gimpo-si's effort and policies to promote the inter-Korean cooperation and exchange. And then let me touch on the detailed project. Gimpo City is located near the borderline between the two Koreas. As mayor of Gimpo City, I'd like to share the local government's effort to bring the peace to the region. Gimpo is also a peninsula. It is surrounded by Incheon, Seoul, and Gaepung to the north. Today, I'd like to talk about under the theme of policy and vision for the Han River estuary. Gimpo is geopolitically important. It is a focal point for national security to the west front. Let me talk about the significance and history of the Han River estuary first. The original name of the Han River estuary is Jo River, which means the grandfather's river. As your grandfather, it suggests the generosity and peacefulness. Gimpo has Goyang, and also in Gaepung in the north has a region named Goyang. So Goyang is the name of the region, and both South Korea and North Korea has the same name. So according to the armistice agreement, before the agreement was made, this region used to be called as Goyang. And from that moment, people started to call it the Han River estuary. Unlike the DMZ, according to the armistice agreement, the free navigation of civilian ships was allowed. So this waterway is common area for both North Korea and South Korea. However, the reality was different. Because of constant military tension and potential military conflict, the free access of civilians was limited and denied. Civilian ships were supposed to be freely navigated through the waterway, but the military authority denied it. And now the Chinese illegal fishing is rampant there. And also, whenever there is an incident or accident, military tensions were highlighted in this region. And also in the 1990s, we constructed Shingo Weir. But this weir cut off the waterway on the Han River, which disturbed the ecosystem, and also it increased the soil sediment and caused many other issues. However, in 2018, a peace mood has been created. For example, Pyongyang Joint Declaration was made in 2018, and for the first time in 70 years, a joint investigation of the neutral waters was conducted. So without this Han River estuary or Cho River, we cannot achieve the peaceful exchange and peace economy in the peninsula. Now let me talk about Gimpo City's plan for the peaceful use of the Han River estuary. Gimpo is close to Seoul, and also it is the only local government with direct physical contact with the north. It shares the Han River estuary with North Korea. So the Gimpo city came up with 3-stage plans to use the estuary in a peaceful manner. First of all, we can use the waterfront by removing the wire fences. For more than 50 years, the wire fences blocked the boundary between the north and the south. So it has 5.8-kilometer long wire fences in the Yeomha River, along the Yeomha River, and also 16.5-kilometer long along the Han River. Now we'd like to return the waterfront to the residents. That's why Gimpo City has been carrying out this campaign named Free Navigation to the Waterway, Free Water. Since the division of the peninsula, this Jo River lost its identity as a river and became a blocked area. By opening up the waterway, we can create a symbol of connection, prosperity, and peace. As I mentioned in the beginning, in order to recover the waterway of the Han River, we have to demolish the Shingok Weir first. So for the past 50 years, people did not pay much attention to the Han River estuary. Now, the central government, local government, civil society, as well as research institute should create a common platform to conduct joint researches on the estuary. A few days ago, I heard a good news. In Goyang City, Janghang wetland was designated as a Ramsar wetland. It is a remarkable event. for the first time in 13 years in Korea. We'd like to register wetlands both in Paju and Gimpo as Ramsar wetlands. We can do this together with North Korea. For the past 70 years, this land has out of reach of people, and that's why they have great ecosystem preserved. So the core project of Gyeonggi Province is to restore port villages near the Jo River. When we open up the waterway, free shipping and free navigation of boats is available, and people can meet each other. I believe this will be the beginning point of the inter-Korean cooperation. And also Goyang in South Korea and Goyang in Gaeseong in North Korea can be connected through this footbridge, and which is planned by the Gyeonggi Province at the moment. This project, I believe, will be the strategic stepping point for unification in the future. In the development of inter-Korean cooperation stage, we should make sure people meet each other and products are exchanged. So by constructing this footbridge, we can create a market platform where products are produced together and consumed together by residents both in North Korea and South Korea. The Gyeonggi Research Institute announced its result of research on the mega region in 2019. Connecting the Han River estuary to the West Sea Rim, they plan to construct a mega region where economic synergy can be produced by connecting bioenergy, IT, and smart energy, as well as other fourth industrialization industries. And also, as you can see in the 2030 development plan of Gimpo City, we are trying to make an economic special zone which can be complementary with the existing complexes. Kaesong Industrial Complex used to be centered on manufacturing, but going forward, we'd like to make more smart industry-based complexes. So, in short, we'd like to focus on the West Sea Rim economic belt, and at the center is the Han River estuary. This belt can connect the international airports located both in Incheon and Gimpo, and also the Incheon port. And Gimpo will be the focal point of that belt. To this end, we have to construct roads connecting Gimpo and other cities. And considering the locations of expressways and ports and airports, we should come up with a transportation network based on Gimpo. So our policy is all about peace. Whenever we talk about peace, some people ask us if peace ever feeds us. My answer is yes. Now it's about time, and peace feed us actually. Now, Seoul and South Korea made a living by constructing apartments and buildings. But going forward, I believe the growth engine of the Korean Peninsula will be the peacemaking. And at the center, I believe, is the Han River estuary. Only when we open the Han River estuary, we can boost our economy and we can make peace in the peninsula. For peace economy and co-prosperity, the Han River estuary will be the symbol. Through today's session and discussion, I'd like to make two proposals as a mayor of Gimpo City. Incheon and Ganghwa, Gimpo, as well as Goyang in Gangwon Province. There are 15 bordering regions. The mayors and governors of these 15 regions need to come up with a joint project in preparation for our future where the unification is achieved. But at the moment, they are making their own project for the future. But the central government needs to work as a coordinator. But I'm afraid the central government has not played that role that much. Each local government and each ministry of the central government should understand the peace project and make perfect coordination between those projects. And second, if the revision of the Act of Inter-Korean Cooperation is completed, the actual authority and actual project should be conducted. In order to do so, all the relevant ministries, like the Ministry of Unification, needs to recognize the role of local governments and provide authority to the local governments and share their expertise with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Chung, for excellent presentation. As I mentioned earlier, Gyeonggi Province and Gimpo City, of course, they are neighboring and sharing the border with the north, and that's one of the biggest interesting and the most interesting characteristic. But it's not just that, because these two local governments are striving, along with other city government and local governments, they are actually taking the lead to establish a peaceful inter-Korean relations, and I can't find any other local governments who are striving this much. So, as a person who is highly interested in inter-Korean relations, I would like to applaud for your achievement and effort thus far. That wraps up our presentation by General Shin Jun-young and Mayor Chung Ha-young. If you look at their presentation material, anthropology, ecology are highly related to what they just mentioned when they brought up some issues of inter-Korean relations. And some parts of anthropology and ecology are also interested in border crossing cooperation. And in this frame, some local governments and civil organizations are trying to do something that the central government cannot do, centered around the local government. And this is a brand new approach. And that's what border crossing cooperation is about. Central government's paradigm is quite different from local governments because central government is paying attention something that they can control in the central manner. For example, you have irrigation, hydraulic issues, some natural resources issues in your region due to characteristics of history and culture. These are something that the central government cannot help or are better at. But within the frame of border cross cooperation, maybe that's something that the local governments can do better and take further lead in the perspective of inter-Korean relationship. So I hope to see more cases of such theories in the future at the local government level because they can be more convincing and they can come up with more detailed and tangible and practical measures and alternatives to suggest. We have a lot of issues around the border between the North and the South Korea, and in that frame of border crossing cooperation, we can find more solutions, and that might be something that will be interesting that we can work on. And I hope to have more talks with the panel discussants. As I mentioned and introduced, we have 3 discussants today. First, we have a council member Kim Dal-soo of Gyeonggi Province Assembly, and I would like to give about 10 minutes to Mr. Kim.
Hello, everyone. I am Dal-soo Kim, a member of Gyeonggi Province Assembly. Thank you for the presentation. Actually, I had a chance to look into the presentation material in advance, and as a member of the Assembly, I came up with 3 talking points based on your presentation material. First of all, DMZ International Peace Network related question. As Mayor Jung mentioned, DMZ and the bordering area and the Han River estuary, these regions need to have one-stop organization that can integrate all the relevant projects. In the past, Gyeonggi Province used to have DMZ Center, where the Ministry of National Defense, the Ministry of Unification in Gangwon Province, and other bordering regions participated together in order to manage and control the DMZ on a joint manner. However, the inter-Korean relations were so tense at the moment, so it had many limitations. So now we try to make an organization based on private sector efforts. The DMZ has a lot of species as well as mines. And thanks to that, people access was strictly limited, and it has become a tourist spot for foreign tourists to Korea. As Mayor Jung mentioned, 250-kilometer long wire fences and the bordering regions. There are 15 bordering regions in South Korea. So this borderline area has had many issues so far. And that's why we have provided many alternatives to the wire borderlines. And according to the keynote speech on the 74th UN Assembly, DMZ was designated as the UNESCO Global Heritage, and other global projects were made since then. From that perspective, we have to think about how to transform the DMZ into more peaceful region. We need to come up with ways to attract more attention from the global stage to the DMZ. To do so, we may need a one organization, and that can be the Global Peace Network. And there have been many suggestions we need to have a global organization to control the DMZ under the control of UN. And I believe this DMZ organization has to have more participation from the private sector so that we can try to make it as an organization based on governance. And we have considered many options like the UNESCO heritage and attracting the international organization and the preservation of the endangered species in the DMZ. And these projects can be considered as a part of the DMZ control organization. And regarding the common platform for the research of the Han River estuary, I believe that's a great idea, but one step further, we can make Ganghwa, Paju, and all the bordering regions to participate. But one step further, I'd like to make a kind of association between these 15 bordering regions. Goyang, Paju, and Gimpo is in effect one community. They have much similarity in the lifestyle and their sentiment. So these regions can make many collaboration from administrative perspective as well as for the inter-Korean cooperation projects. In order to improve the local economy, we can attract many organizations from the outside. Paju, Gimpo, Goyang, these three cities are within a 15-minute distance. So I believe these three cities in particular can make higher synergy when they collaborate. And also in order to encourage the participation of the local residents, I believe we need to have some time to discuss on this matter in depth. So the government has been talking about the inter-Korean cooperation for a long time. However, the residents have not realized the real concept and the real expected effect of such cooperation. But I believe we need to have more time to explain about that. And greatest advantage of unification that is expected by the public would be the free travel to the north. Unlike the expectation of the government, so the government thinks the economic benefit as the biggest advantage of unification, but people in reality pay more attention to the fun and travel to the north as the advantage of the unification. Let me conclude here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kim Dal-soo, for your grateful insight. Next, I would like to hand over my microphone to Ms. Yoo Jae-shim. Thank you, General Shin Jun-young, for your presentation about Gyeonggi Provincial Government's plan and achievement, as well as Mayor Chung Ha-young's vision of Gimpo City. In terms of policy, I want to mention one thing regarding these presentations. We have a lot of administrative departments, and it's important to balance different issues and agenda. Seemingly, it shouldn't be like you're just putting things on the shelf and it's too messy and it's not organized. But when it comes to integrating relation and related activities, we have to think of what we've done and how far we've gone so far. And I'm very surprised by all the achievement that the Gyeonggi-do and Gimpo City had despite the outbreak of COVID-19 in 2020. And I think it's now time to rearrange and have more in-depth review of what you've done in Gyeonggi provincial government. For example, you talked about a joint Hangang Estuary project. You talked about some DMZ activities. Also, provincial government wants to enhance the awareness of citizens regarding integrating relations. Maybe it could be the same as what we've done, but we could somehow approach differently. And if I analyze all the different border changes and issues around the world, governance, regional characteristics, these are some keywords from my analysis, but peace and prosperity could be something that Gyeonggi government can work on more as a unique project of a local government. And I hope Gyeonggi government pay more attention on these areas. And when I listened to the presentation by Gimpo Mayor, he already brought up some questions that the panel discussants should bring. But if I add some more, any DMZ related departments at government and in public organization, there are about 23 organizations, and there are about 183 development agenda competing each other, surrounded by DMZ. And if you're a student or a young generation who are not really interested in DMZ, probably their perception is that DMZ equals some kind of economic development. This should be more interpreted in regional governance. And this is not taking your job. Rather, it can create some jobs. And it could be the driving force to boost the local economy. And I was thinking maybe we can have a long-term plan to transfer this awareness of the younger generations. So I dare suggest Mayor Chung Ha-young and General Shin Jun-young, whether it will be a question like what kind of governance you are pursuing. For example, in Gyeonggi provincial government, it's really hard to keep preservation and development of DMZ, and that's my major, but it's very hard and I'm still looking for answers. But what kind of governance ideas does Gyeonggi provincial government have, or what kind of governance ideas that what kind of governance ideas that the Gyeonggi provincial government want to have. And as Council Member Kim Dal-soo of Gyeonggi-do mentioned, after listening to Kim Po's presentation, we talked about Ganghwa area, Incheon, and some wetland governance could be an item we can talk about. We can talk about Jogang River governance. It's impossible to enjoy the luxury of the time, but maybe within 2021, I'm curious whether Gimpo City has some kind of governance for these specific issues of specific areas, and I'm just curious about what you have, and it will be a great opportunity to share that with the general public today. Thank you.
예, 유재심.
Thank you, Ms. Yu, Jae-sim Yu, for your questions and talks. So we listened to the two presentations and two panelists, and as a moderator, I think that all these good projects are only meaningful when the other party is willing to cooperate with. If that's not the case, all these projects are meaningless. So we have so many conferences and so many researches on the inter-Korean cooperation. However, it is so regrettable that these cooperation policies has limitation because the lack of cooperation from North Korea. They may be intended to ignore these trials, or they may not even know about these projects. But anyways, in order to make sure these projects have actual achievement, we need to take more serious perspective to make actual fruits from these policies and initiatives. In that regard, our last panelist, Mr. Sang Young-hong from the Korean Sharing Movement, will talk about his experiences because he has accumulated so much experience in the field of cooperation with North Korea. So I believe he can share his feelings and experience that he gained on the ground in relation to the inter-Korean cooperation. Please share your experience in detail so that we can get some guidance from your experience. Hello everyone, I am Sang Young-hong. As a discussant, today I had a great chance to listen to the presentations and discussions on the inter-Korean cooperation and exchange. The inter-Korean cooperation has two parties, the North and the South. South Korea and North Korea may have different hopes and expectations from these projects. Only when the hopes and expectations are consistent, we can make actual achievement. So I believe we need to look into the actual intentions and expectations of North Korea for these projects. As Ms. Junyoung Shin mentioned, she shared the achievement of last year on the project of Gimpo city and also this year's plan. Regarding your presentation, and in particular regarding 2021 project plans, you have 15 projects and 15 activity list. I believe this layout was made based on the discussions with all the relevant departments within the government. But I'd like to add one thing to the timeline. The Inter-Korean exchange projects, for the sustainability of these projects, has to be based on the national consensus. So for Gyeonggi province, the consensus between the Gyeonggi province residents is essential. When these efforts are accumulated, we can eventually make a big influence, an actual influence. For example, we have to increase the capacity of the private sector to enhance the effort for the inter-Korean cooperation. So the Gyeonggi province has unilaterally announced their plan for the inter-Korean cooperation, but these plans do not have how the province will interact with multiple stakeholders and how to attract those multiple stakeholders to the project. And if we have many stakeholders participating in these projects, we can finally make successful projects. And also the more detailed action plans for the projects is also needed. And we also need to think about how to support these private sector-led projects. There are so many organizations and activists and civil society groups within the Gyeonggi province. We need to make sure these organizations are participating in the Inter-Korean Cooperation Project. And at the same time, the government should be able to increase their capabilities. This may sound too sensitive because the inter-Korean projects may have some political factors, but if it has too much political factor in it, it's not easy to make it succeed. So the mayors and governors of local governments have to have mutual understanding. But at the same time, we have to consider the actual need of local residents. Based on the local residents' demand and needs, we have to make more realistic policies toward inter-Korean cooperation. I think this is the essential part of those projects. From that perspective, Gimpo City as a local government of South Korea, I believe Gimpo City is a representative of those bordering regions in South Korea. For example, there are 15 cities and communities bordering North Korea at the moment, but I'm afraid there are too many cooperation projects. We need to make collaboration with each other. So the bigger collaboration we can make, the bigger effect we can achieve from the inter-Korean cooperation project. And also, on a continued manner, we have to collaborate with each other. After the Korean War, the bordering community has never received much attention like today before. But these attention these days is to make co-prosperity and preservation of ecosystem. So in the past, people used to pay attention to the bordering region for the sake of military tension and the national security, but now people are paying attention to the region for the sake of peace and ecosystem. Now we reached a stage where we could make more environment-based discussions. So in short, we have bigger value to discuss at the moment. So not only the economic approach, but also more broader concept-based approach is needed, because only economic perspective can be misunderstood by the North. They may have questions over the economic cause and economic incentive. That's why I say we need more broader concept to discuss. More future-oriented values need to be discovered and discussed together with the Gyeonggi province residents as well as the bordering 15 regions in South Korea. By doing so, we can make a common value and maintain active discussion on the value going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hong. And that wraps up some comments from our panel discussants. After two presenters and three discussants' comments, something came up to my mind, and the rules and responsibility allocation between the central government and the local government haven't really reasonably divided, because it's important to fully realize their potentials with what they have. And North Korea is also a great agenda, and biggest characteristic of a Korean government with the local government should consider and overcome. Between the central government and the local governments, we do have some theoretical collaboration, but autonomy among local governments doesn't really exist, I realized. So it's also an issue regarding how we can pursue cooperative projects. So I mentioned about theoretical base of the cross-border cooperation, and between borders, you can't stop any exchange and cooperation spirit. Already you are in the area of cross-border region, and there are some natural conditions like river, air, and some communities share the same history and culture. There are some issues that the central government can really delicately carry on, and there are some gaps that the central government can solely deal with. So these are the areas that the central government needs the local government's cooperation and support. And once you have such tendency in the local government policies, we are able to realize supplementary relations between the central government and local governments. We have about 10 more minutes before we end this session. Well, we didn't start sharp, but I think it would be an ideal to finish this session by 2:50. So we have about 10 minutes. So now I would like to hear more from General Shin Jun-young and Mayor Jung Ha-young to answer or to add some more after listening to discussants. Maybe you can spend about 3-4 minutes each, please. Okay, this time I want to ask Mayor Chung to go ahead first.
Thank you for the great comments from the panelists. First of all, regarding the comments made by Jae-sim Yu from Seoul National University, the border area, and especially the Han River estuary, can be developed and also preserved. This is such a dilemma for local government between development and preservation. After the division of the peninsula, for a long time, the local residents were not able to do anything on the border area because there are a lot of laws that prevent the development of local landscape. So there have been a lot of laws limiting the development. But they had to sell their land in order to educate their children. They didn't have a chance to look at and enjoy the natural landscape. So it's too much luxury for them to consider the value of the natural resources. For their perspective, top priority is constructing apartment buildings and factories to make profits. Making values and creating job opportunities by preserving the natural resources is a nonsense for them unless a concrete layout is provided. That is why the local governments cannot achieve the preservation of natural resources on the border area. One single local government cannot achieve this project alone. The central government and other local governments should collaborate. And also, regarding your suggestion in relation to the wetland, the Han River estuary and all the wetland have cultural and historical homogeneity. So together with Gimpo City and other border areas, we have many joint projects under consideration. I believe we could expedite our efforts going forward. And as you mentioned, there are universal values we should consider, like history and culture. Economic values are great, however, when we have universal values, like the cultural heritage and history and people exchange, these values can also include a project for isolated family members to meet together as a part of our project to construct the footbridge between the north and the south. I think this kind of a small project can be a breakthrough of a larger project.
토론 말씀.
Thank you all the panel discussants for wonderful comments, and I want to focus on what you asked me. As Dr. Yu Jae-shin mentioned, DMZ governance. Well, if you think about DMZ Forum, where you are now, or Let's DMZ Festival, this is a part of the governance activities that Gyeonggi provincial government is pursuing. And the full name is Cultural and Art Festival. The reason we take this name is just a result of our concern. As a moderator said, maybe for us, DMZ is the issue of preservation or development. However, for the North, they're not sure about why we should preserve DMZ. Through DMZ peace agreement, our goal is to first secure the ecology and environment, and that's DMZ event itself can act something like we can actually ironically forget about the DMZ, and it's pretty awkward to say festival, and I'm not sure how North Korea will think. That is why we just don't want to say DMZ Festival. That's why we say Culture and Art Festival of DMZ. And within the South, if you think about the governance that we can take and think of, let's say the biological preservation area in Paju and Ilsan area. We want to create the committee, and Yeoncheon area already have some kind of a committee, but Gimpo, Paju, Goyang city are very different with the different perspectives of different citizens. So it's important to learn the lesson from Yeoncheon city. It might not be easy for Paju, Gimpo, and other cities to take the examples from Yeoncheon. And we do not expect that happen overnight or even maybe 5 years, 10 years. We believe that it should take more time, and that's the principle of our governance. As Secretary General Hong Sang-young mentioned, to strengthen the actors' capability for the inter-Korean relations, Gyeonggi province has great know-how and expertise, and that's what we are trying to create at the Committee for the Inter-Korean Relations among other local governments and the civil organizations. And we were told that why do you need more and more new organizations just to make other stakeholders participate? And well, this is quite different from what we had in the past. For example, Ministry of Unification plays its role as approval body, really. And to do so, they need to listen to our opinions, but the committee that we try to create at the local government level should be the venue where, of course, local government members, civil organizations, but other participants can join together to discuss. You can think of management and labor relations. So it's more like labor and labor relations if you think about some corporate activities. And to nurture private organizations, Gyeonggi provincial government is highly interested in nurturing more organizations within the region. So we included We included those plans in our 2022 plan, but hopefully I can ask more help from Councilmember Kim Dal-soo as he's right here. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and answers. In the interest of time, I'm afraid we have to conclude here. Still, there are two different perspectives towards the DMZ. These different perspectives can be integrated into one. Only then we can make a new chapter for the peaceful peninsula. Given the global history, there have been a lot of borderlines. Among these borderlines, some were made according to the natural resources, but some were produced by the interest of people and governments. But historically, there may be some difference in the longevity, but the borderline that was created by the interest of people is to be eventually removed. Considering that, the DMZ was also created as a result of conflict between two different concepts and ideologies. So one day, I am confident that the DMZ will be removed and the borderline between the North and the South will be removed. From that perspective, including human rights support projects and also other cooperation projects to North, if the perspective polarization continues, these projects cannot be successful. So far, we have made so many opportunities to talk about the inter-Korean cooperation project. And I'm afraid the perspective toward North Korea has been polarized and it became deteriorated every day. But at least we need to try to narrow the gap, and the fundamental dynamic of such effort to narrow the gap would be the people. Next year, we elect a new president. It may be there may be some different policies toward North Korea from the opposition party as well as the ruling party. But if we cannot make a consensus on the North Korean policy, we will never be successful in terms of the inter-Korean cooperation and exchange. We need to understand the reality on a more precise manner and make sure the same mistakes is not made on a redundant manner. Thank you for your great discussions and presentation. As a moderator, I appreciate all the efforts you made today. Thank you, everyone.
네,
That wraps up the parallel session 5 under the topic of performance and issue of inter-Korean exchange and cooperation policy of Gyeonggi Province. Once again, we would like to extend our gratitude for the presenters and panel discussants. My name is Yang Dayeon, the MC for your DMZ Forum Parallel Session 5. Thank you.
잠시 후 2021 DMZ 포럼 평화운동 협력 세션 1-5 한반도 종전 평화 세계가 함께 풀어야 할 과제 세션이 시작될 예정이오니 내 외빈 여러분께서는 자리에 착석해 주시기 바랍니다. Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention please? Peace Movement Session 1 and 5, the global challenge to end the Korean War and establish peace on the peninsula is about to start. Please come into the hall and take your seat. Also, may I ask you to set your mobiles or other electronic devices to silent mode. 모든 세션은 동시 통역이 제공되며 한국어는 7번, 영어는 8번입니다. As an official language of our conference is English, simultaneous interpretation service will be provided today to assist your needs. Channel number 7 for Korean and channel number 8 for English. 코로나19 확산 방지를 위해 저희 2021 DMZ 포럼 관계자 전원은 방역 소독을 포함해 정부에서 권고하는 모든 지침 사항들을 준수해 안심하고 행사에 참여하실 수 있도록 모든 노력을 다하고 있습니다. DMZ Forum 2021 staffs will make every effort to ensure that everyone can participate in the forum safely by following all the guidelines recommended by the government and authorities to prevent the spread of COVID-19. We kindly ask for your understanding on this matter. 네, 그러면 잠시 후 3시 10분부터 2021 DMZ 포럼 평화운동 협력 세션 1-5 한반도 종전 평화 세계가 함께 풀어야 할 과제 세션을 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 여러분
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Peace Movement Session 1-5 under the topic The Global Challenge to End to Korean War and Establish Peace on the Peninsula. My name is Yang Dayeon, your MC today. Welcome to Peace Movement Session 1-5. We are going to talk about global challenge to end to Korean War and establish peace on the Korean Peninsula. Let me introduce the participants today. Ms. Lee Young-ah, coordinator of Korea Peace Appeal Campaign, as a moderator. First presenter, Ms. Lisa Clark, co-presenter of International Peace Bureau and Goodwill Ambassador for Peace on the Korean Peninsula. You will meet the presenter online. Next presenter is Lee Tae-ho, Director of Center for Peace and Disarmament, People Solidarity for Participatory Democracy. First discussant is Vice Chair Carol Tana, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, and she's online. Next discussant is Mr. Im Jae-hwan, a member in Korea Peace Now Grassroots Network, followed by Mr. Oscar Escobar, member Korea Peace Now Roots Network. We all have different time zone, and thank you very much again for participating in DMZ Forum. And now I would like to hand over my microphone to Ms. Lee Young-ah, the moderator and the coordinator of Korea Peace Appeal Campaign. Let's give her a big round of applause.
Thank you for your kind introduction. I am the moderator, Young-ah Lee. This session, Peace Movement session, has been organized by the Korea Peace Appeal Campaign, celebrating the 70 years from the commencement of the Korean War. We have conducted this campaign. So 7 religions and all the civil society groups in Korea have participated together in the campaign. Under the theme of the global challenge to end the Korean War and establish peace on the peninsula, we'd like to have some discussions. We have invited all the distinguished presenters and discussants. I believe this will provide a meaningful opportunity to share our experiences and explain why we need the support from the citizens to realize peace on the peninsula. Before we officially start the session, I'd like to make a housekeeping announcement. Our first presenter, Ms. Lisa Clark, was not available to participate in the session. This is so regrettable. And I request your kind understanding of the absence of Ms. Lisa Clark. However, let us introduce the presentation contents of Lisa Clark. And this session will be lasted for 1 hour and 20 minutes. Let me start the session by introducing the presenters and panelists. First of all, our first presenter would be Marie-Laure Prairie from the Netherlands. She is the manager of the Global Advocacy at the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict, or GPAC. Let us invite Ms. Marie-Laure Prairie. Make sure your presentation will be done within 15 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Marie-Laure Poiré, the manager of, there is an echo, the manager of the Global Advocacy at GPAC, also known as the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict. It is truly my pleasure and honor to participate in this session of this year, DMZ Forum, to share the efforts undertaken by GPAC members to build sustainable peace on the Korean Peninsula. So today, I will start my presentation by giving you a short description of the regional approach of GPAC within the Sustaining Peace agenda. Then I will share very few global examples of the GPAC regional approaches to peace building. And finally, I will end by describing GPAC's role in engaging in the Korean peace process. So about GPAC, it was founded in 2003, and GPAC is the world's largest global network of and led by local peace builders with over 200 civil society organizations active in the field of conflict prevention and peace building. GPAC consists of 15 regional networks, including Northeast Asia. And GPAC's mission is to really link civil society with relevant local, national, regional, or international actors and institutions, so that collectively we contribute to the prevention of violent conflict. So really, ultimately, we firmly believe that conflict prevention initiatives need to be locally grounded and internationally supported so that peace can be sustained in the long term. And for peace to be really sustainable, well, policies should reflect and be inclusive of the needs and expertise and realities of local communities. So sustaining peace, as defined in the dual UN United Nations General Assembly and Security Council resolution, it's a goal and process aimed at preventing the outbreak, the escalation, the continuation, and recurrence of conflict. Sustaining peace is primarily the responsibility of member states based on the principle of national ownership. However, today's realities dictate that sustaining peace, well, cannot be really accomplished by individual member states alone and solely at the national level. What we see is that with current conflict dynamics, well, too often these dynamics have regional and cross-regional linkages and repercussions. So in this context, sustaining peace requires much greater efforts to build a strategic and operational regional partnership with local peace builders, including women and youth, but also national actors, regional and sub-regional organizations. So as a network of organizations that operate at the regional level, GPAC structures provides actually a very good practical example on how to support the work done by local peace builders to sustaining peace at the regional level in a very complementary, comprehensive and coherent manner, and to build a partnership at the regional level. So regional GPAC regional networks actually often serve as the key entry points of policy engagement for local peace builders at the regional level. So who are the main actors we, GPAC, engage with at the regional level to support our peace building efforts? Well, there are four mainly. So the local peace building networks. Why? Because they uniquely contribute to the articulation of a very people-centered perspective that is very much often missing in state-centric security approaches. So their local expertise and grassroots knowledge play a vital role in early warning and response, as well as in the analysis of conflict dynamics and power relations. So that's the first actor. The second actor we engage with are the regional and sub-regional organizations. Why? Well, because they can provide localized support to prevent the crisis from escalating. And being close to the crisis neighborhood and having more acceptance among local population, they are often in a better position to understand and influence it. In the case of Northeast Asia, this specific actor is missing, as there's no regional organization in the region. The third actor, member states, of course, because they form an important role and actor at the regional level. They separate actors. Because they oftentimes are members of regional and international organizations. So regional partnership require member states buy-in to maintain their importance, to develop strategic vision, and also to ensure effective implementation of policies and action at the regional level. And then finally, the United Nations, of course, well, because UN peacebuilding activities are primarily aimed at assisting countries emerging from conflict and reducing the risk of relapsing into conflict. So, and currently the UN reforms include a very ambitious goal to strengthen regional infrastructures and capacities and coordination on peace building. So I will now share a very brief few examples, a global example of GPAC regional approaches to peace building, just to give you a sense of what we do in other regions of the world before moving to what GPAC is doing in Northeast Asia. So for instance, in the South Caucasus, well, it's been decades-old protracted conflict there, for instance, in Nagorno-Karabakh or between Russia and Georgia or Russia and Ukraine. And these conflicts remain quite tense, and they have very lasting adverse impacts on the overall peace and security in the region. So there, GPAC members activated, for instance, a network of women mediators to legitimize a woman's contribution to the peace processes. And at the same time, to counter disinformation, they introduced peace journalism to address hate speech and also help build an environment of mutual support and trust. So that's a very, very simple example of what our members are doing in South Caucasus. In the Western Balkans, that's another context. There, the political and social situation has long been marked by a very high youth unemployment rate, mistrust in the government elite, and disillusion towards EU accessions prospects. And this is leading to renewed ethnic tensions and the rise of national rhetoric. So how to counter that? Well, GPAC members have been supporting the integration of peace education curricula in schools in very close cooperation with the Ministry of Education, for instance, in Serbia and Montenegro, so that to practice and promote social and conflict resolution skills in the school system. And another global example in Latin America. Well, Venezuela, as you might have heard, certainly Venezuela has been marked by a profound political, economic, and social crisis with a multidimensional but extremely destabilizing impact in the region. More than 4 million Venezuelans, 14% actually of the country's population, is leaving the country, has been leaving the country since 2014. And they've been relocating primarily in the region in Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. So again, what are we doing there? Well, GPAC members have launched a citizen diplomacy initiative, which aims to strengthen cooperation and coordination among various sectors of both Venezuela and Colombia. So these were 3 global example efforts of GPAC members at the civil society level in their respective region to come up to solution to the crisis and to help build peace and prevent the conflict from escalating. Now, about GPAC's role in engaging in the Korean peace process, as a way of a quick background on the context, as you all know. So the Northeast Asia regions remain characterized, if you will, by Cold War era political interactions. So the absence of a sustained dialogue and repeated military aggressions have heightened tension on the Korean peninsula and across the region, leading to crises such as the threat of nuclear war. The 6-party talks launched in 2003, involving China, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the Republic of Korea, Russia, Japan, and the US, were the closest alternative to an institutional mechanism for regional peace and security. But sadly, they were suspended in 2009. But still, a regional approach is an absolute necessity there. So it is really for that reason that a broader regional civil society foundation must be established to be able to engage in a coherent and timely manner with political development within relevant countries, as well on the bilateral and multilateral level. So it is, again, this backdrop that GPAC launched the Ulaanbaatar process in 2015, after years of cautious engagement and network development in the region. So the Ulaanbaatar process is at the moment the sole platform in which civil society from all parts of the regions, including both Koreas and all former six-party talk member countries, is actively and consistently participating through times of both crisis and stability. So let me share some of the achievements of the Ulaanbaatar process, of GPAC Ulaanbaatar process. So it has established relation with track one dialogues with support from the government of Mongolia, hence the name Ulaanbaatar process, and promotes meaningful and inclusive engagements of civil society in regional and international processes. As we know, with official level efforts toward the resolution of the conflict largely at the stalemate, well, it is crucial that civil society is recognized as having a role and that multi-actor dialogue processes are valued. What else? Well, it is providing a safe and very inclusive space for regional civil society to exchange views and shape the way forward. So that safe space has created a very conducive environment for the establishment of a regional organization in the future that would be hopefully representative of the diverse perspective of civil society, including women and youth. Third, well, the process has also facilitated agreements and recommendations from all participating organizations on issues such as promoting a nuclear weapon-free zone, the Korean Peninsula peace process, and also promoting women's participation in peace building altogether. The process also strengthens the skills and opportunities for regional civil society organization through cross-regional learnings, exchange visits, and training workshops. So effective collaboration, I mean, we found at GPAC that effective collaboration and knowledge sharing as a network with a common agenda will mean an increase in trust and confidence in civil society. This will in turn position the network more strongly to collectively call for inclusive conflict prevention and peace building, and ensure that the diverse perspectives are represented. And finally, owing to these years of sustained efforts in Northeast Asia, well, the European Union has been engaging with GPAC and will be granting us support to scale up actually the Ulaanbaatar process over the next 3 years. So I can tell you right now that we will continue to strengthen, with the EU support, we will continue to strengthen the position of civil society in Northeast Asia as a network. We will continue to create and secure space for active cross-society engagement. But we will also now focus a little bit more on engaging with and complementing official, regional, and international processes for peace in the region, including with the EU. Yes, despite this common understanding of the critical need for action for peace and denuclearization in Northeast Asia, and the urgent need to build peace on the Korean Peninsula, the region is highly unrepresented in international peace-building discussions. So really with the support of the EU, we will aim at bridging that gap, really, by building partnership with governmental and intergovernmental actors who are supportive of dialogue, and by learning from other successful regional processes, such as the EU. So to conclude, I want to reiterate that GPAC's commitment to pursuing our efforts in raising awareness and reinforcing interest in conflict prevention through dialogue on the Korean and Peninsula, but also to go beyond silos and to consider innovative and civil society-led approaches to overcome obstacles in the peace process. So thank you for this wonderful opportunity to share GPAC's effort, and I would be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you. In 2018, I met her in Beijing, and it's been great to see you again online. And you highlighted the importance of the civil organization and GPAC's role, and some Ulaanbaatar process was in detail discussed. Ulaanbaatar process, as mentioned, despite the military conflict in the Northeast Asia, and this has been a great venue to discuss the peace issues. However, in Korea, we have some participants for the Ulaanbaatar dialogue, and today we have a second presentation by Mr. Lee Tae-ho, and he's the living witness of the human right improvement and various activities. He's a director of a Center for Peace and Disarmament and People's Solidarity for Participatory Democracy, and also standing executive committee member, Korea Peace Appeal Campaign. And we would like to talk about his topic called the Civil Action for Peace, and that has never been experienced. Please make sure you have your presentation in 15 minutes. Good afternoon. My name is Lee Tae-ho. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's very hard to finish my presentation material, and I hope to finish that within the given time. But before I start, I would like to mention that it is a great honor and great opportunity to share some Korean Peninsula issues with the international community. It's not just for the issue of the Koreans, and I really truly appreciate all the international participants. And in the course of the peaceful solidarity, this is very meaningful. You are at the forum held in Gyeonggi-do. This is the venue for this event, and it ranges across the DMZ from North Korea with the region called Hwanghae province. It is called demilitarized zone, and it has been 70 years that we are divided. It has been almost 30 years since both North and South Korea became the UN member states. But the Korean Peninsula issue, as of yet, still remains unsolved, and it's getting worse, to be honest. After Pyeongchang Winter Olympics Games in 2018 and April 27th, Panmunjom Declaration by the leader of the two Koreas, perhaps it was not only the residents of the Korean Peninsula that desperately wanted a historical turning point. It is not just to resolve the issue of the past, but a lot of people talk about Indo-Pacific region, and any kind of conflicts can happen in the era, and this is also related to prevent further new conflicts. Unfortunately, in 2019, U.S.-North Korea Hanoi summit ended without an agreement. In 2021, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un criticized South Korea's military buildup and the U.S. hostile policy towards the North Korea, and expressed a strong position that unless the fundamental political and military issues were resolved, North Korea would further reinforce its nuclear missile capabilities. Moon Jae-in administration is proposing various inter-Korean cooperation projects to North Korea to the extent that they do not deviate from international sanctions. However, North Korea regards the purchase of state-of-the-art weapons and military buildup, which is the Moon Jae-in government is emphasizing, together with the military training for transferring wartime operational control as a violence of agreement, and South Korea's proposal of cooperation as a non-essential issue. Joe Biden, President of the U.S., took office last year, and new administration is known to be reviewing the North Korea policies of past administrations, including the Trump administration. North Korea is expressing discomfort with the new Biden administration's emphasis on human rights in the North Korea and strengthening of military deterrence against the North Korea and China, but does still seem to be exploring the possibility of negotiation. President Biden mentioned stern deterrence and diplomacy in his congressional address at the end of April. He mentioned practical and coordinated approach will be taken, however, it's still yet clear. Anyways, because of no deal in Hanoi, the U.S. lost the opportunity to freeze the North Korean production of nuclear materials, and the North Korea also lost the possibility of easing some of the sanctions connected to its people's livelihoods. Both parties will propose programmatic and phased solution and start negotiating peace. For the ultimate success of the process, however, we need to think about the fundamental issues that have been causing distrust and conflicts. Then what are those fundamental issues? The first issue is regarding the substantial reduction of mutual threats. What South Korea has spent on defense in the last 15 years is actually more than North Korea's gross national income during the same period. In 2019, South Korea's military spending was about 46.7 trillion won, and that is 1.3 times more than North Korea's estimated total gross national income. This figure actually doesn't have the military spending of U.S. forces in Korea. Moon Jae-in government has been increasing its defense spending by 5.4% to 8.2% each year. Nuclear submarines, light aircraft carriers, and satellite launch vehicles are still ongoing. If we still have this severe imbalance, but if we are neglecting this issue by coming up with appropriate countermeasures, I'm not sure we can reduce the distrust that exists between the two Koreas. Another issue can be found, the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. The complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is still vague. For North Korea, probably it means that probably is just to give up some of the powers. It feeds on the imbalance and inequality of international nuclear disarmament system, as well as the disparity in conventional armament between the two Koreas. U.S. has this nuclear deterrence policy, and that needs to go along with our policy. And world without nuclear weapons need to be done by all the international community. The third issue is a transition to a new relation. Doesn't matter if it's a peace agreement or any new actions. Are we ready to move on to a new relation? In 2018, North and South Korean leaders agreed that they must stop hostilities and switch to a new relationship based on trust in order to solve any Korean Peninsula's issues. However, after no deal in Hanoi, North U.S. and South U.S. relation have been dealt with the task force, Korea ROK U.S. Working Group. ROK U.S. Working Group probably efficient for the pressure, however, has not played any special role in developing a maximum engagement strategy. So U.S. and Republic of Korea, while having an overwhelming advantage in military power and military spending, maybe they should take the lead and engage in more proactive measures to improve relations, maybe refrain from military threat. And the international society also should be supportive for these advances and proactive efforts. Last issue is related to value diplomacy or human rights diplomacy. Recently, the Biden administration has been emphasizing value diplomacy. At the Quad, US, Japan, India, Australia summit, the leaders emphasized the rule of law, freedom of navigation. However, you can also think about democratic values and territorial integrity. To protect these values, the US government emphasizes that ROK US Japan military cooperation should be strengthened. However, none of these values can be realized through military means and pressure. So I think to elevate any military conflict and deteriorate security issues, these really cannot help to improve human rights, which need to be reviewed. And that's what I think. At the end of the day, the Korean Peninsula faces a typical security dilemma. For the last 70 years, North and South Korea and international society have failed to resolve this dilemma. Probably we need a new approach, something that we have to profoundly review. Some remedies couldn't solve the problem so far, and that in that way we have to be more practical. Then what are some realistic and practical measures? Peaceful rather than militant, pursuing victims' sentiment and taking care of it who were suffering from the war and conflicts and threats. In the past, the Korean Peninsula issue was decided on the table of world powers with a handful of security experts. It was not disclosed sufficiently to the public. It is no longer working that way. And it's time for civic action for peace that has never been experienced. And with a desire of international citizens, we need to listen to their voices, and we should let the international politics answer the question. So, the Korea Peace Appeal campaign is an international campaign that seeks to amplify voices, such voices. From 2020 and in 2023, to commemorate at the 70th anniversary of the armistice, we need to use this Korea Peace Appeal to meet the 4 demands. That is, number 1, end the Korean War and establish a peace agreement. 2nd, completely denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. 3rd, resolve the conflict with dialogue and cooperation. And 4th, invest in human security and environmental sustainability. In 2021, by April 2021, 369 religious groups and organizations and all the partner organizations will join together. This is the most comprehensive network regarding the division of the Korean Peninsula. In 2020, our activities focused mainly on the necessity of the sharing information home and abroad, and to secure common goals and strategies by adjusting various opinions. It wasn't fast enough, but still it was unprecedented movement. What we would like to do in 2021 is to get the domestic campaign on track and lay the foundation for undertaking international joint action. Today's seminar could also contribute to such goal. To start with, in Korea, efforts are being made to gather the citizens, and we call them Korea peacemakers. And they can form a network of activities in different regions and at different levels for communications and cooperation. Then also there are some campaigns already started in which influencers can participate in. Projects have been embarked upon to promote the participation of political circles as well as civil societies. We also plan some National Assembly member gathering and head of the local governments. And so far, by the end of April this year, 62 assembly members participated in petition, and major governors and mayors from the region nearing the border, such as Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, and Incheon City, also participated in a petition. Also, we are discussing some local government resolutions. In order to discuss some implementation plan with the international partners, we have a series of programs online waiting. And what we would like to do here is that on July 27th, this is the commemoration day of Korean War armistice, and we want to designate International Joint Action Week, maybe before and after July 27th. And that's our suggestion, and that's why we will have the series of programs and discussions. Then the goal of 2022 is people's signatures is that people's signature will spread through the world and lead to the declaration of support and action from the civil societies of various countries, religious groups, individuals, organizations, governments, and politicians. Then in 2023, the campaign will focus on making the 70th anniversary of Korean War Armistice by delivering the signatures of people. And we also ultimately want to draw out the resolution of the UN General Assembly calling for an end to war. That's why we want to make 2023 as the first year of peace on the Korean Peninsula. It is essential not only to get the signatures of global citizens, but prepare the international cooperation system and active strategies tightly for actual change to occur in international public opinions. Inter-Korean, China and US, Russia, as Marie mentioned, and all these countries' civil organizations need to participate further. In particular, we have some civil organization network between Korea and the US. There's a Korean Peace Reconciliation Network between the US and the Japan. In fact, between Russia and China, Ulaanbaatar process is a good example, and they have the implementation network, yet it's not well organized. So it's important to further develop such network. Second, other than the first-hand stakeholders, there are some countries that somehow related to Korean War. For example, 16 countries who sent the troops for Korean War, and they were only mentioned when we celebrate and commemorate the end of the Korean War. But these are the entities who contributed to the foundation of Korean Peninsula's peace, and it's a big task that we can gather this network to have a tangible result. There are some neutral states who tried to monitor and help Korean peace and prosperity. They've been also playing important roles and had great contributions. And it's also important to come up with the measures to utilize such solidarity and support from these neutral states. And the cooperation with the government from those countries and civil organizations from these countries. And then EU may have to play an important role here. But at the end of the day, whether it will be successful or not will decide by how many people as a Korean peacemaker will take interest and take part in peace on the Korean Peninsula and band together as Korea peacemakers. The first step is to participate in the signing, and next to publicize this campaign and include themselves in the connection network to continue the cooperation necessary for bringing about change. And I would like to earnestly ask the discussants and participants in this forum, as well as the online viewers, to become Korean peacemakers. That wraps up my presentation. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you for the presentation. So the Korean peace process has been in a stalemate since the no deal in Hanoi. Now we need to make a new approach. And also for the residents who have not experienced peace on the Korean Peninsula, we need to make the messages to the global stage so that the messages can be answered by the global citizens. I believe that was the summary of his presentation. as we celebrate the 60 years since the armistice, we believe this will be a great opportunity to have a discussion and make tangible achievement on a global stage. Please visit our website to participate in the campaign. Your participation will be the great foundation for future development of the inter-Korean relations. As I mentioned in the beginning of the session, Lisa Clark was not available. So let me spend just 3 minutes to go through her presentation material, if you don't mind.
Let me make it brief. Korea peace signing is my great honor to participate, and we have a goal to have 100 million people to sign, and it's a great and bold goal. It is very hard to grab this many signature, but it's important because we can see the desire of the international citizens, and that can lead to the civil movement. In the West, often people think the Korean War is unfinished war, and that happened in 1950 when I was born. In 1953, Korea had the armistice, and about 3 million people died, and still a lot of people suffer from it, and it's not yet finished. And it still gives some reason of the dispute and conflicts between the citizens, and that led to the further conflicts. And this could be some kind of a passive peace because you just neglect. And one time, philosopher Johan Carlson emphasized the active peace. And active peace, as mentioned, should include all these conditions, and people should have all the rights when they can guarantee their own rights. And that's also when we start the genuine value of human rights. And that's why we have to finish Korean War. Active peace in Korea will be a great gift, and because it will be a great inspiration for everyone who loves peace and pursue peace. A lot of world is still not well aware of the Korean Peninsula, but soon they will know the history of a Korean War. And once again, it is my great honor that I was assigned as a Goodwill Ambassador of a Korea Peace. And a lot of people in Europe implement active peace movements. Still, they are not well aware of what's happening in Korean Peninsula. And so far, we've had some positive exchanges, but still, we do not have any unprecedented cases that move the entire world. We have to make sure that we should not forget some bright and the great moments that we experienced. We haven't realized the active peace state, but still we have to maintain our legacy. And we still will discuss the peaceful solution through track 1 diplomacy, but I believe that the government role and civil society should pursue accordingly. And we have to promote peace campaign on Korean Peninsula to realize the genuine international solidarity. Women cross DMZ and Ulaanbaatar process with some civil organizations from the six-party talk members are good examples to find the direction of a Korean peace. And such solidarity will establish the mutual trust through platform, and it's necessary to elicit some promise from both sides. Korean War peace campaign needs to share some ideas with the peace activists. And if I think about some personal experience of a reformation of a social society, civil society's role are furthermore important. Of course, we need to realize that track 1 diplomacy first, but we need to realize the participation of the civil society for the genuine active peace. Timely activities are needed right now. And we have some 4 elements of the peace to realize the peace on the Korean Peninsula. And we should share information. And Ulaanbaatar process hopefully can affect some other regions. And other civil organizations can expand their solidarity, and it should be generalized. That's how we can connect all the campaigns and issues that are ongoingly happening. And we need to discuss some discussions about lifting sanction. It shouldn't only affect the Korean Peninsula. And we have to reflect the purpose and the achievement and some damage of the non-violence alternatives. And once we witnessed the sanction to Iraq in 1990s, and that was only suffering and painful for civil organizations. North Korean sanction once was on the highlight, but it is getting faded. And according to the UN Humanitarian Support National Team, about 90% of international trade in the North Korea is under multinational sanction, and it is the North Korean citizens under great suffering. And we can think of the NWFZ, and the goal of our peace campaign is to realize the Korean Peninsula, Asia, and international society without nuclear weapons. And we have to expand our participation and solidarity. As mentioned before, we have all different situations, and we can always find some cases for ideal directions. And now it's time to seek and peace rather than armistice. We have to start active peace, and we have to elicit some participation from international society. I just wish that Lisa Clark can deliver her own idea, but I hope I deliver some main ideas of her presentation. We have 3 discussants. First, we have Vice Chair Carol Turner, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. And I would like to hear from her first based on the 2 presentations. Carol Turner is leading Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, and she's playing as a vice chair in the UK. And also, she's been the foreign affairs advisor to the government. And make sure you have 10 minutes to deliver your ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and good morning from Britain. First of all, congratulations on bringing this conference together. I know from personal experience how time-consuming and difficult these tasks can be, and thank you very much from the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament in the UK for inviting us and including us. This discussion about the international factors and the role of organisations outside the Korean Peninsula is led by 2 important contributions this morning. Lee Tae-ho's paper on the background of the Korean War and the role of civil society in Korea identifies 3 underlying elements in bringing this to an end and highlights the problems faced. The mountain that we all have to climb to achieve this. Marie-Laure Poir's contribution reinforces the role and importance of civil society in the process, with practical examples and successes from almost 20 years of experience of GPAC, a people-centred approach, as Marie-Laure describes it in some detail. And if I can just take a moment to make a personal reflection, I was particularly struck by GPAC's emphasis on the role of women as peacemakers. I agree that their place in society and the way in which we are socialised as women help shine a light on the problems from a different point of view and encourages peace buildings. I had a very small microcosmic example of this recently in Britain in another organisation, a completely different organisation to CND that I was involved in, where I was negotiating about internal differences amongst colleagues who were collaborating on a project. And this took place both at a general level, which involved men and women discussing, and at one level where women only discussed. And the environment and the atmosphere was very different indeed. I found that educational and informative. Okay. Together, these two papers provide considerable food for thought and discussion. I have very little time, and I just want to pick out one or two threads that were raised and use a couple of examples here in Britain to illustrate things. First of all, CND fears a build-up towards a second Cold War in the confrontation between the US and China, a confrontation in which the British government and British military forces are already involved. There is a project, a UK aircraft carrier and a supportive flotilla will be sailing towards the Korean peninsula, towards China, in a matter of months, and will be escorted and protected by UK forces on a military exercise. So we understand from our own direct experience about this. Second, on sanctions. It will be very difficult to shift public attention towards Korea in the current circumstances that we face, but we will do our best to influence and encourage the very few friends we've got in the British Parliament to raise the issue and to support your campaign against them. I'm sure Marie-Claire would agree from her own experience that sanctions is a real driving force in separating different communities within the same state and nation. Okay, so Lee Tai-hoo identifies three underlying factors that are needed to end a very long-running conflict on the Korean peninsula. Multi-threat reduction, the denuclearization of Korea, and the transition to a new relationship, and puts forward the role of the Korea peace appeal and the role it can play in amplifying the voices of the Korean people and calling for peace, and how this might be backed up by the support of civil societies outside of the region. The first thing to note, of course, is that what governments and state institutions regard as national interest is not necessarily aligned with the interests of the majority of their citizens. Traditional notions of security rest on a military foundation, the protection of the borders of the state from invasion and breach. Whereas the best interests of the majority can often lie in very different directions in human security. And we have, for more than a decade in Britain, we have had successive government reports which have identified the main threats to Britain. This is not at all surprising, and it can be generalised to the majority of the world. The main threats in Britain as terrorism, cyber attacks, health pandemics, climate emergencies, and the activities of international criminal organisations, drug trafficking, people trafficking, etc. Insofar as these are the main threats, then it's pretty obvious that the existence of nuclear weapons can do nothing whatsoever to overcome them. Insofar as countries face a threat from weapons of mass destruction, in the case of Britain, and I guess for the majority of states in the world, the most likely form in which the most likely form in which weapons of mass destruction can intervene as a threat is as use by terrorists and non-government actors of chemical and biological attacks. So, to put it at its crudest, nuclear weapons contribute nothing whatsoever to protecting the world's populations from the threats that it's facing today in contemporary society. Nevertheless, in Britain, as elsewhere, successive governments of different political persuasions have maintained that Britain must have its own nuclear weapons system, Trident. Why? I think the simple answer lies in the weight and gravitas that governments believe the possession of nuclear weapons bestows on their role in international politics and their weight within the international community, although they never publicly admit that this is the reason for spending breathtaking amounts of public resources on maintaining nuclear weapons. In the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, which continues to threaten people in Britain just as it does across the world, our government has taken a shocking decision. Simultaneously, it's announced that it is capping the pay rise of nursing staff in our health system to 1%. These staff are already undervalued and underpaid, but without them, we would do virtually nothing to combat the impact of COVID. At the same time as it announced this, the government also announced that it will increase the stockpile of Britain's nuclear warheads by 40% over the next few years, and it will no longer provide transparency or democratic accountability by letting us know how much this costs. We're not going to be told how much the government is spending on this project. That is absolutely shocking. One of the things that CND, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, has done, has utilised the slogan, nurses, not nukes, to good popular effect. And this is the slogan that you can see on the screen behind me that we've used for a number of years. NHS, the National Health Service in Britain, not Trident, Britain's nuclear weapons. Okay, so returning to the Korean Peninsula, the example of Britain, I think, which isn't in the midst of nuclear armed powers, which is itself an imperialist power in the world. Britain is not faced by the same problems as the Korean people face, but it does illustrate the difficulty of campaigning for denuclearization. The introduction into international law in January this year of the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was greeted by Britain, the United States and France by a collective statement, an announcement that never, under any circumstances, would they consider signing or ratifying this treaty. The fact that the treaty exists and is now become international law, however, is to me a very interesting example of how small nations and civil society over a period of time can successfully campaign, at least at the level of propaganda and consciousness, can successfully campaign against government intentions and government positions. We all know and we all understand that there is much reformation, much reform needed of the United Nations, that it is dominated by the big powers, and that the majority of less influential countries have less say and less weight in what is decided. But in this important and underlying area, the majority of countries involved in the UN were able, over a long period of 12 years or more, to come together and take the first step to what would be a very important change. So I think that's an inspiration for the project that we're talking about today of denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. Civil society initiatives like the Peace Appeal have an invaluable role in redressing the unequal relationships between states and citizens, and in attracting support beyond the immediate populations which are affected. But as we know, this is far from an easy job. I realise that I've got to wind up in a minute or so. I could go on for much, much longer. I would just like to make a couple of concluding points. One of the examples that Marie-Claire used was the example of Serbia and Montenegro. And I know from a 10-year personal experience and involvement in opposing the civil war that was going on in the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s, I know that although the situation on the surface is very different today, in fact, that is another example of Cold War politics. The economic factors which drove the civil war internally within Yugoslavia were exacerbated by big power rivalry, primarily between Germany and the United States, whose object was to prevent the Russian Federation from ever raising to the level of power and impact that the Soviet Union had, and preventing Yugoslavia from acting as a pole of, I won't use the word communism, but as a sort of, as a pole, as an alternative systemic way of organising society. And the results are the sorts of things that Marie-Claire and her organisation and other organisations are having to deal with today. So, to wind up, I would like to say that I'm really pleased to hear from Lee Tae-ho's contribution that there will be an activity around Armistice Day on the 27th of July, a week of action, I think she said, to raise the consciousness and raise the issue, not only across Korea but outside, to the general international consciousness. And I hope that CND will be able to play a very small part in that, but please call on us to do the best that we can in the circumstances that we are facing, and all power to you in your struggle and your just fight for a denuclearization of the peninsula. Thank you very much again for inviting us.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. I just wish that we have more time for you because Miss Carol Turner Miss Carol Turner has been in this area for many years, and I just wish we had more time. I just wanted to make sure that it is actually not this year of the 70th anniversary of Korean War armistice. It is 2023. I just want to clarify. And July 27th, we have our goal to have such week in 2023, and through your disarmament activities in the UK, we had a great opportunity to hear from you in the UK perspective, and it will be very helpful and contributing to our movement. And first, now I want to invite two discussants together because they are both from the Korea Peace Now Grassroots Network and Generation Peace. Korea Peace Now Grassroots Network is working to official end of the Korean War, and it is mainly having Korean American members, and they have a regional offices to support the official declaration of end of a Korean War. And first discussant is Im Jae-hwan from Generation Peace and Korea Peace Now Grassroots Network, and he's also was the co-founder of the North Korean defectors. And I would like to hear from Mr. Lim Jae-hwan first, and followed by Mr. Oscar Escobar, and they will highly focus on some roles of younger generations.
I'm joining from the west coast of the United States. Looks like we have a very tight time, and the pressure is on us. We'll try to be tidy as we can. I'm actually a long
조금 더 자세히
as the member of the Korea Peace Now Grassroots Network, I thought it would be very critical for us, for me and for Oscar, to share our personal brief experiences of what we did and how we got be involved in the KPNGN activities. So let me briefly share the screen. So I am actually a very long resident of the Gyeonggi province in Ansan City. My family still resides there. So I'm very honored to be part of the discussion today at the DMZ Forum. I'm currently, as I mentioned, living abroad in the US, but have been very vocal on peace in the Korean Peninsula. As Lisa Clark, unfortunately she's not here, she mentioned the importance of the Sunshine Policy, and I am actually the beneficiary of the visit to Mount Kumgang in 2004. I have a very vivid memory of meeting the North Koreans there and interacting with the nature, the beautiful nature that we unfortunately cannot visit at this moment. And then kind of jumping to 2016, when I became an international student studying in the US. As many of you know, the South Korean and United States tension with North Korea skyrocketed. So I felt the urgency to act as a South Korean living abroad, but there was nothing I could do as a student at the time other than learning more about North Korea and about Korean history from diverse political perspectives. So I founded a social practice organization, Humans of North Korea, shortened as HNK. And as part of that organization activities, I invited a wide range of scholars from both liberal and conservative perspectives. So some of the speakers include Professor Bruce Cummings from University of Chicago, and Morris Tan, who actually served under Trump administration later on, and a few North Korean defectors and other activists. So the purpose was to learn diverse ideas on the experiences back in North Korea and how we can proceed as the younger generation to bring more peace for the Korean Peninsula. The other activity that HNK enacted was supporting the resettlement of the North Korean defectors, both in South Korea and America. So as you can see here, the Mandu workshop that HNK organized was very engaging, get to learn about North Korean culture and got to hear about their experiences back in North Korea. So after I moved to Los Angeles for my graduate program, I joined the Korean peace movement in America to support the stabilization of the Korean Peninsula. I'll go more in depth later on, but I did lobby local representatives to co-sponsor House Resolution 152, which is calling for a formal end of the Korean War last year. So while lobbying, I shared my stories of working with North Korean defectors and the fact that many defectors still have their families and friends back in North Korea. So many defectors that we know in the media tend to be the human rights activists, but many of my defector friends tend to share their opposition towards sanctioning North Korea and the impact of the international sanction against North Korea, because that eventually affects their families and friends back in North Korea. As all the presenters today shared, I actually urged the need for more open and engaging platforms for younger generations to be involved in the Korean peace movement, to not only learn, but also discuss diverse opinions, as well as to plan for the peaceful Korean Peninsula. Let's briefly hear Oscar's experience.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jaehwan, for this excellent presentation. And definitely, due to the the tight schedule we have, I think I will just go straight to my personal story. But please know that as a Korean peace activist here in the U.S., I definitely echo all of the points made by the previous presenters. All of them definitely have so much weight and so much relevance, and it's very important to see just how much this campaign has grown on a global level, especially being able to see issues, connections, and examples, parallels from other countries. So so in terms of my personal story, I also want to mention why I think it is important for me, Jaehwan, and I to share this, in that it's definitely, of course, critical to think and examine about these issues, especially at the big picture, and then as we also talked about it at a more regional level. I think it's important to also zoom in as much as you can towards the individual and just think for a minute, why am I here? Why am I, as a as a young person living here in the U.S., very passionate about this and what actionable steps I can take. So so basically, prior to college, I had very little knowledge about Korea. Korea, and especially the Korean War, is often glanced at or skipped entirely in U.S. schools, and that is actually a very big problem. It is one of the major reasons, why here in the U.S. The Korean War is known as the Forgotten War. However, in my case, I eventually did have the opportunity to take a class in college called Two Koreas, and it was like a huge revelation, especially learning about the role that the U.S. played, before, during, and immediately after the Korean War. And I think just thinking about it, about why, as a non-Korean, I became very interested, very passionate, and very just aware of this issue. I would say it came down to two reasons. Firstly, it is as a U.S. citizen, I felt a responsibility to take action on behalf of a country that bears so much responsibility for the present day dilemma. And secondly, as a global citizen, I also felt a responsibility to take action so I also felt a responsibility to work towards peace on the Korean Peninsula in order to bring peace to the region and to the rest of the world, especially with how interconnected we all are today. And I later learned about the Korea Peace movement in the US, and I joined at a time when we were starting to get really more and more serious about engaging youth. So I, along with Jay, have been able to witness the growth of the young Korea peace activists in our US network since basically the beginning. And I personally want to show others that the issue of Korea peace affects everyone, and that the Korea peace movement at large is open to anyone, no matter your age, race, ethnicity, or other background. And lastly, I would like to I would like to conclude on my personal story, especially since Jaewon mentioned, that he is a international student in the U.S. I, as a first generation Latinx college graduate from the U.S., I'm honored to be speaking here today. And as I mentioned earlier, I just hope to inspire other young people to join our hands in this movement once again, from any and all backgrounds. We are in this issue all together. And now I will pass it back to Jaewon to briefly talk about the general and youth activities in our network.
Thanks, Oscar, for sharing your story. So we will travel briefly back to 2020, last year, summer. The advocacy week that I here and Oscar participated. So there were 4 agendas that we were promoting to the local representatives. One representative was House Resolution 152, calling for a formal end of the Korean War. And the other one was No Unconstitutional War Against North Korea Act of 2020. And the other 2 were Korean War Divided Families Reunited Act, which seemed to be happening this term. And then lastly, Enhancing North Korean Humanitarian Assistance Act. So we'll be resuming the advocacy lobbying activities this July. So please have your heads up for our future updates. And then Oscar.
Yes, and here is just a really, really brief overview of all of our activities. So here on the left, you can see the joint activities. And what this refers to is a joint plan between 3 of the US networks, that is between the Korea Peace Network, the Korea Peace Now Grassroots Network, and the Peace Treaty Now. All together are known collectively as the Korea Peace Partnership. And basically, at the end of 2020, we got together and then we basically, talked about and created this joint plan for activities in which members between all of our networks can participate. And basically, we have 5 overarching goals. Firstly, that is to continue to build support in Congress for ending the Korean War with a peace agreement, and to facilitate humanitarian assistance to North Korea. And that is basically expanding and to continue doing the work that Jae-won had mentioned earlier about the virtual Peace Week here. Secondly, we also oppose the US-ROC military exercises. Thirdly, we also have a campaign to lift the travel ban that has been in place in the US since 2017. Fourth, we also want to promote study and education, namely in the shape of a Korea Peace Study Group. And then lastly, we want to coordinate public communications. And this includes, of course, trying to reframe the conflict from the Korean War to the ongoing war with North Korea. And then lastly, on the right, you can see our youth activities. And so within the Korea Peace Now Grassroots Network, we have the Gen P Caucus, which is what Jae-won and I are officially here today. And we're also in the process of starting campus chapters actually across different colleges and schools across the US. And then lastly, we would also like to make a shout out to Women Cross DMZ because both Jae-won and I are part of their inaugural Feminist Korea Peace Fellowship. And then ultimately, with all of these activities together, we want to continue expanding. We're trying to find other innovative and creative ways, to engage the younger generation, especially once again from all backgrounds. That is one of the key challenges. But then we know that with opportunities like this Peace Forum, we can continue to raise awareness and just show others that it's also open to anyone. And yes, thank you.
네, 아마
I believe you may have many questions during and after the presentations, and also you may want to add some comments to the presentations. I apologize for the limited time, but in the interest of time, I'm afraid we should conclude here. Not only the Korean Peninsula, but also around the world, there are multiple collisions and multiple wars happening at the moment. Beyond borders, we need to reach a consensus and support to end the wars around the world. I think this message has been once again highlighted through the presentations and your discussions. I urge all the citizens around the world to participate in these campaigns and activities to end the Korean War. And also, President Moon is visiting the US at the moment. I believe this will be an opportunity to reconnect the ties between DPRK and the US and restart the dialogue. Let us watch a short clip about the campaign.
네, 바쁘신 와중에도 이렇게 시간을 내서
Thank you very much for all the participants, presenters, and discussants. Despite your busy schedule, that wraps up Peace Movement Session 1-5 under the topic of a global challenge to end the Korean War and establish peace on the peninsula. As moderator mentioned, we do have some videos, and to wrap up, I want to end this program. My name is Yang Dayeon. Thank you very much. If you feel your life in Korea like war, or you just feel like a slave who wish to survive, and if you want to look for someone who died for you, that means it's because the war hasn't ended. if you think we have to get rid of something that we don't understand, and if we set that as a navigator of your life, and we try to avoid the sight of monitoring, and it's probably because we live with the war the whole time. We're scared every day, that's why you don't even realize that you're scared. And we're pretty dull to the death, and probably we are friends now, but we will become enemies to each other. And the only way to solve the problem is to end the war and seek peace. And sign here. Here and now, we need your signature for the peace campaign. We don't have to wait longer. We need to end the war. We still expand the military base, and that push people to the end, and people strive their life around the war. Some powers cover your mouth so your voice is unheard. We want cooperation rather than militant competition. We want a world without nuclear weapons, and we want all these peace in our daily life. And I wish to have this promise to end war, and I will start that with my signature. And we want to gather 100 million people. It's not a lot of people if you want to pursue the peace. And after the 70 years of division, sorrow, and the violence, there's no reason we continue to do so. And that's why we sign here today. And we sign here today. Here and now, let's sign first and see what will happen. We no longer need to wait, and 70 years is just too long. And let's finish the war. Let's end the war. Here and now, we can end the war. Here and now, we can end the war. Here and now, we can end the war. Here and now, we can.